I went to the pursuit of truth. So we've got a few more Sky News to do with Iran and Israel, and it's from the beginning to the end. It's complete change. So we start off with Mr. US was a former US ambassador to Israel, and I think I mentioned it on the last Pursuit of Truth, the one because I'd already recorded this, and it was Sky News were asking them about. Okay, so Iran is with the IEA, and as Israel apparently has 90 warheads, are they going to join the IEA, so that they can be monitored like all the other countries with nuclear weapons are monitored? And it's just like and you see this, and this is throughout this whole Pursuit of Truth, is the hypocrisy and double standards. And it's not just Israel, it's of all the world leaders. And you'll hear that, of how they will pick the things that they want others to follow, and yet they will do other things, and yet they'll expect you to be of a standard that they're not. And it's just like, Israel always said that they're not going to be the first ones to bring it in, but if they already have it, then they already have it. What's the falsehood about? And how can you expect other countries, you moan at other countries who are joined up to this? It's just like, this is the world we live in. It's so uneven, isn't it? Then it's the Pentagon talking about the commander-in-chief and how great he is, and how this plan no one else could have ever done. But I suppose, I don't know if it's because Iran really are that impotent, or they're just being careful, or Israel took out all their weapons, but it seems like there were no jets, there were no ground-to-air missiles launched. So I expect anyone could have done that mission, even Russia, because I assume Russia has the same kind of technology, no? Doesn't it? Or maybe it doesn't, because they always seem to big up the American stuff than the Russian. Then it's JD Vance. God, let's hope he's never the president after Trump. Him talking about, well, basically how great Trump is and all this kind of stuff. And I thought it was quite interesting what he said, and trying to, the US trying to broker peace in a sort of rather forceful way. I don't know if that really works as a concept of peace, but then I suppose if it works, it works. But I don't know how much international law has been broken out of that. Then it is the UN Security Council, and we hear Russia, obviously, backing Iran. You hear USA backing Israel, and then we have more independently Slovenia and Somalia, and their views of whether international law has been followed or not, and everyone calling everyone to come back into the meeting and talk, whether they left or not, I don't know. But then it is about is Michael Clark from Sky News talking about the site, and he's saying that we don't need to worry about radiation because it's not got up to fusion or fission standard yet, although the IEA seem to be worried and want to check it, but of course until the hostilities stop they can't check it. And asking for a ceasefire. And now all of a sudden, after Iran launched their response to the American bases, which all seemed very, either it was organized with the US and Qatar and those countries, or it was ineffective. I don't know which. It is strange. There's two things I wanted to talk about here of this that interest me, is maybe a bit like Animal Farm or Big Brother in that creation of an enemy. It seems like they don't seem that strong in their response. They don't seem to be able to defend themselves. Their attacks, if it was an actual attack, they're claiming, oh yeah, we sent the same amount of weapons, and this is, what was it they called it, annunciation of victory or something. It didn't look like that. When you see what Israel and America can do, that's some serious stuff. But it's strange that we're worried about Iran then, who don't seem well, they don't seem that capable unless they've been taken out. I don't know. But it seems like that, like the last pursuit of truth, it's all about rhetoric. They talk the big talk, but so I don't know. But yeah, no, this ceasefire may not last because Israel claimed that Iran have, flagrated it by launching, was it one or I don't know how many after the time. If that's true or not, we don't know. And Donald Trump saying, no, don't, if both sides really want peace, then one or two after, within the first few hours is not a reason to, they talk about it and say, sorry, that was a mistake, or we didn't get the message through, or whatever happened, to explain it. But of course, if they don't want peace, then they can easily just use that as oh, wow, the other side did it, so I'm going to send loads of bombs over. I mean, we'll see whether they really want peace, because if they really want peace, then they will stop this. Maybe peace serves one side more than the other, I don't know. But I suppose, we have to say well done to Donald Trump. His bully tactics, his, using all these, his power. I mean, we did moan, like, as we do in the West, of, why world leaders don't do things to stop things, like, with what's going on in Gaza. Why they don't just come on, you stop or else, like people always say why doesn't America strong arm Israel? Yeah, and I guess, for credit, we have to give to Trump that he does at least use that power that he has, as long as he uses that power for good. The only problem is he breaking international law? And that's a problem, because if he is, then he's creating that atmosphere for other countries to think, well, if he's doing it, if the leader of the free world's doing it, then why should we not do it? We can't have double standards and hypocrisy. But it seems like, when you listen to all these world leaders, they all do that. They're all like Russia pointing the finger at America or Israel, and yet look what they're doing in Ukraine or what they've done historically. And, all these countries do bad things, and all, look, the UK and the US during the Afghan and Iraq wars. It's like, maybe, like, can we not keep to any of these rules, or we want to break them when we can? Of course, those with power can easily break them and get away with it, whereas those who are smaller can't, because the bigger ones will say, well, no, we're going to go to the textbook here, and you did this. So, but the other thing that was interesting to me is the way that when we look at things, depending where you're born, time and place, and all that, what I just talked about, is how you look at it. When you hear, without even someone speaking, if a Russian says something, we instantly think, our mind already switches to, well, this is, we can't trust this. Whereas if an American says it, we can. And that interests me, that we have that mindset. Where did that mindset come from? And, most people don't really think about things and just watch something. Will not even need to even hear what's going on to form an idea. And isn't that, in a way powerful, but also very worrying, because it's easy for us then to be programmed, as we all are to a certain degree. And then, and it sort of brings me back to George Orwell and why his books Animal Farm and 1984 are so important, because that's what it explains about, the fabrication of war, the creation of an enemy to hate, it doesn't actually, the things that appear may not actually be as they are. Like, I was feeling like, I don't know, this is like, because of Animal Farm and 1984, thinking like, is Iran really this enemy, or is it just just playing the game of like, oh, we're going to look at an enemy, and then, we're not going to do very much, and it's all going to be for face, and or is it just the leadership is all about worshipping of the supreme leader and not really about, because I don't, it doesn't, we're always, they're always talked up, like Russia and China in the West, as I say, as a threat. And I'm sure if you go to Russia and China and North Korea and the West is talked up as a threat. And it's interesting because we can't ever think of how other people see things, because we can only see from our point of view. But it is, and that, I guess, makes it always difficult to actually see objectivity and truth. That's why I think you can never really be independent, because we all have that mindset, isn't it? So how can we truly ever be independent about anything? Like, who is the real threat? Is it a country that speaks a big talk and says, I'm going to destroy you and I want to annihilate you? Or is it the one that can actually do it? Or has actually, in the process of it, or actually does do something rather than just talk? So I don't know, but it's just, in my world, I'd wish we didn't have weapons, we didn't have nuclear bombs, and we'd all get on with each other, but I guess we don't live in that world. And I guess sometimes it's just a shame. But it was interesting, I think it was the Israeli the Israeli ambassador talked, and he was talking about how Iran now, they can concentrate on their people. And yeah, if only countries did do that, concentrate on humanity, actually not just their humanity, every humanity, and their actions for others, and didn't worry about bits of land and power and ownership and greed. But unfortunately, that's where we all come from, isn't it? And we're all buying into that still, waving our flags. Anyway, here's these. Take care, Daisy. God bless and peace.
Gone midday. You're watching Sky News today. We're discussing the ramifications of the US's action in Iran overnight, bombing 3 of its nuclear sites. Joining me now to discuss this is Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli ambassador to the US. Good afternoon to you. Your reaction to what happened overnight?
Well, I think one cannot overstate the importance of what happened. The Iranian regime, the Ayatollah's regime, are, I believe, standing now with a dilemma. Are they going to give up their illegal nuclear activities, or they'll have to give up their own regime? They have been, for quite a few decades, destabilizing the entire region in terms of their illegal nuclear, with the ballistic missiles, with sponsoring terror. Just today, Israel has sustained quite a few casualties as they launch their ballistic missiles. Each one is half a ton, indiscriminately on Israeli towns. So here we are still bracing for more attacks, and we will continue to do what we need to do in order to make sure that we are safer, and indeed the Middle East and even beyond are safe.
Well, as a result of this then, is the region safer or more dangerous this lunchtime?
Well, I think it's much safer. First of all, I think that Iran has been pretty much defanged in many ways. It's not that they are not a wounded beast and they can still strike, but I think their options and capabilities have been reduced quite substantially. And indeed, if they will do the mistake and strike, let's say, American forces, then I'm sure that they will stand to lose their entire regime. I think the entire, from what I get, the Iranian population, 80% of them are not happy with this regime and would be quite happy if they would be free out from this dictatorship.
Iran has powerful friends, China, Russia. We hear that the Iranian foreign minister is now making his way to Moscow to speak to Vladimir Putin. What do you think could happen there?
Well, I think that what we call here the axis of evil, which is North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia, have all also been getting a big blow. And I don't think that they have too many options. First of all, Russia is still in a quagmire in the Ukraine. China is not quite ready for any military action. They have been very robust in advancing their economic and taking over economic markets and in other ways. But I don't think that they have. I don't think that they will do anything.
And talking of robustness, does this situation make Benjamin Netanyahu's position as prime minister more robust?
Definitely. And I can tell you, as someone who has been very much criticizing him, I think that right now his stock is sky-roofing. How long will it take? I don't know. But certainly he is in a Churchillian moment. We have to remember that Churchill also, after World War II, he lost the election the first time. So anything can happen here.
Well, he came back, and we know that Benjamin Netanyahu has come back many times before. But final question, if this is all about nuclear weapons and stopping Iran having them, should Israel now be more open about its own nuclear weapons program?
Well, Israel has been a long-standing position that it will not introduce will not be the first one to introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East. I believe we will continue with that.
Although, Danny Ayalon, let me just push you on that. Many people believe that Israel has something like 90 nuclear warheads and the capability to make more. Should Israel now engage with the IAEA on its own nuclear program?
Well, I would say, Israel is in a unique position where we have been threatened, including by Iran, of total annihilation. So this ambiguity policy that we had vis-a-vis the nuclear weapon was quite understandable. However, Israel has never threatened anybody in this region. All our wars have been of self-defense, and I hope now we will not have more wars in the region, and then every eventuality is possible.
Okay. Danny Ayalon, appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
In fact, I will pause there. Let's listen to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and General Dan.
Last night on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump.
Oh, even to the pregnant pause.
The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even
Russia
close.
Bunker busters?
Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy across the board, this was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called.
Yeah, we know he went.
It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of a plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command area of responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped two GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against two nuclear target areas. All three Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the president stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all three sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of fourth and fifth generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11.
Oh, that's not
Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the president clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the president and the secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
Me?
Yeah.
So is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
Let's see.
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the president decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process. Wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that General Kurilla increased force protection in Iraq, Syria, and Gulf, in those areas. Were they given any advance warning the attacks were coming? And also, Mr. Secretary, when were congressional leaders notified? How long before the attacks took place?
Sure. To your first question, the risk has clearly been rising over the last few weeks in the region. Based on that, and not a particular awareness of this operation, we've made smart decisions to minimize the risk to U.S. forces in the region.
They were given no advance warning?
No, sir.
Isn't that against international law to fly above people's airspace?
They were notified after the planes were
afterwards.
safely out.
That's
we
okay
complied
then,
with
yeah?
the notification requirements of the War Powers
After
Act.
the attacks, they were notified.
They were immediately thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Secretary. A few questions. Do you believe you completely destroyed Iranian nuclear program? And how about Iranian ballistic missiles? Your ally as Israel always saying that is biggest threat. And second question is very important. What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence on the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect, which means especially in Fordo, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Regarding retaliations, Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
World War.
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Okay.
And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes.
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets, force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region, and we have been respectful and in working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict, we acknowledge that, but the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace, but I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
The past few hours, the US Vice President J.D. Vance has spoken with our American partners NBC on Meet the Press with Kristen Walker. Mr. Vance was asked whether the US was now at war with Iran.
No, Kristen, we're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And let me just say, Kristen, that we're incredibly grateful and proud of the American Air Force pilots who did an incredible job last night. The operation was really extraordinary. These guys flew from Missouri. They didn't land a single time. They dropped 30,000-pound bombs on a target the size of a washing machine, and then got back home safely without ever landing in the Middle East or ever stopping other than to briefly refuel. And of course, they did that in the air. So it's really an incredible operation, a testament to the power of American military. And I think what shows what can happen when you have that great American military in the hands of capable presidential leadership. What we did is we destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. I think we set that program back substantially, and we did it without endangering the lives of the American pilots. That's an incredible thing, and I think we all should be proud. Whatever our politics, we should be proud of what these guys accomplished. A very, very high-impact mission under a lot of pressure.
Mr. Vice President, let's talk about what happens next. President Trump posted on social media, quote, any retaliation by Iran will be met with force greater than what was witnessed tonight. If Iran retaliates against the U.S., as it is threatening, what will the United States response be?
Well, Kristen, that's ultimately going to be the president's decision. But what we've said to the Iranians is we do not want war with Iran. We actually want peace. But we want peace in the context of them not having a nuclear weapons program. And that's exactly what the president accomplished last night. I really think there are two big questions for the Iranians here. Are they going to attack American troops, or are they going to continue with their nuclear weapons program? And if they leave American troops out of it and they decide to give up their nuclear weapons program once and for all, then I think the president has been very clear. We can have a good relationship with the Iranians. We can have a peaceful situation in that region of the world. We have to step back a little bit, Kristen, and remind ourselves that we negotiated aggressively with the Iranians to try to find a peaceful settlement to this conflict. It was only when the president decided that the Iranians were not negotiating in good faith that he took this action. He didn't take it lightly, but I actually think it provides an opportunity to reset this relationship, reset these negotiations, and get us in a place where Iran can decide not to be a threat to its neighbors, not to be a threat to the United States. And if they're willing to do that, the United States is all ears.
Well, let's talk about the possibility of negotiations. I mean, the Iranian foreign minister responded to the strikes this morning saying Israel and the U.S. have, quote, blown up diplomacy. Mr. Vice President, is there any real hope for diplomacy, or is diplomacy dead at this point?
Well, I think the foreign minister is exactly wrong. We didn't blow up diplomacy. We only took this action, Kristen, when it was clear, as the president said, that the Iranians were tapping us along. I think it's important for the American people to appreciate here that if you go back to March of this year, we had the entire administration engaged in this diplomatic effort. And frankly, in March of this year, we had some optimism. How do we get from there to now? And the answer is we felt very strongly that the Iranians were stonewalling us. They weren't taking this seriously. They were trying to draw this process out as long as possible so that they could rebuild their nuclear weapons program without the threat of American action. We had a limited window in which we could take out this Fordow nuclear facility in particular. The president decided to take it, but we didn't blow up the diplomacy. The diplomacy never was given a real chance by the Iranians. And our hope, Kristen, as the president said repeatedly, is that this maybe can reset here. The Iranians have a choice. They can go down the path of peace, or they can go down the path of this ridiculous brinksmanship, of funding terrorism, of trying to build a nuclear weapon, and that's just not something the United States can accept. I want to say something, Kristen, just to the Iranian leadership. Look, they have tried to build a nuclear weapons program. That program is now destroyed. They tried to build a conventional missile program to attack neighbors in the region. That missile program has shown to be a failure. They have funded terrorism aggressively in the region, and now most of their terrorism proxies are destroyed. The Iranians are clearly not very good at war. Perhaps they should follow President Trump's lead and give peace a chance. If they're serious about it, I guarantee you the President of the United States is too.
So has the administration received any messages from the Iranians since the attack overnight?
Well, Kristen, I think as we sit here, it's been about 12 hours since what happened last night. We have received some indirect messages from the Iranians, and it's possible, of course, that some of my colleagues in the administration received something early this morning, and I haven't heard about it. But look, our expectation is we're going to learn a lot about what the Iranians want to do, how they want to proceed over the next 24 hours. Again, I just can't be clear enough here. The president has said he wants now to engage in a diplomatic process, but if the Iranians are not going to play ball here, they didn't leave us many options as it pertains to last night, and they won't leave us many options in the future.
If Iran disrupts shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, which of course handles about a quarter of the world's oil trade, would that be a red line for the United States, Mr. Vice President?
Well, Kristen, I think our biggest red line is the Iranian nuclear weapons program. That is really what the president has said we need to get rid of.
But what about the Strait of Hormuz?
Steps towards doing that last night. Well, I think that would be suicidal, Kristen, for the Iranians themselves. I mean, their entire economy runs through the Strait of Hormuz. If they want to destroy their own economy and cause disruptions in the world, I think that would be their decision. But why would they do that? I don't think it makes any sense. I don't think that it makes sense for them or for anybody else. What would make sense is for them to come to the negotiating table, to actually give up their nuclear weapons program over the long term. And again, if they're willing to do that, they're going to find a willing partner in the United States of America.
Mr. Vice President, when did President Trump exactly make this decision, and did he coordinate with Israel?
The president, honestly, Kristen, I don't know that any of us knew exactly when the president made the decision, except for the president himself. But if you back up a little bit, we engaged in this diplomatic process. I think that he decided probably by mid-May that this process was not going anywhere. And so he decided to issue some private ultimatums to the Iranians. And then eventually, of course, we decided to destroy the Fordo nuclear facility and some of these other facilities ourselves.
Vice President J.D. Vance speaking to NBC. Well, in the hours following the US attacks, Iran began its response, starting with a series of missiles directed at Israel. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, was live in Jerusalem as sirens sounded in many parts of the country.
Living like this all the
It,
time.
of course, is an attack on Israel because Israel has been carrying out wave after wave of attacks on Iran over the last 8 or 9 days. Hence why we've been seeing these daily missile barrages. But I think we'd also have to assume that it is the first reaction to what the Americans did overnight. Now look, that's a red alert, which means the sirens will probably sound in this area quite soon. Oh, there's a, can you see the trail of a ballistic missile there?
I don't know whether it's staged.
Again, that looks to me as though it's heading towards possibly the Haifa or Tel Aviv region, where at the moment it looks like the majority of sirens are sounding around the Haifa and Tel Aviv regions along the Israeli Mediterranean coast. Another one as well. Oh, I can see quite a few there now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Interception in the sky above us, 7, 8. So that is a 9 now. So I think we're well into double figures of missiles fired. Now, in recent days, the waves have often been 20, 25 missiles fired from Iran towards Israel, and it looks like it might be a similar figure now. Clearly not all at once. I can hear sirens in the distance and now all around us as well.
Suddenly they got loud there, no? That sounded like a fade up. I don't know. Sorry to be questioning that.
Okay, so
Ali,
sirens sounding in Jerusalem, which doesn't necessarily indicate that Jerusalem is the target of these strikes. The sirens also sound when interceptions are above the city because the risk of falling debris is very, very great when the ballistic missiles are intercepted quite high up in the sky. Of course, the debris field can cover a very wide area. I'm seeing another trail of a missile there going through the smoke of previous missiles. Still, I would say, all heading towards, broadly speaking, the Tel Aviv region, and we'll hear shortly, inevitably, the thud and rumble of interceptions.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up after the break, we'll have the
Security Council are continuing to meet at the request of the Iranians following those strikes by the US overnight. We heard once the meeting was convened from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who again called for restraint, again asked for there to be a cessation of hostilities, saying that the International Atomic Energy Agency must be given full access to the site to carry out its inspections. He said that Iran must respect non-proliferation and that peace cannot be imposed through violence. Only dialogue can be the way for peace to be brought to the region. Well, following Antonio Guterres' address to the UN Security Council, we also heard from Miroslav Yenko, who's the Assistant Secretary General for Europe, Central Asia and the Americas, who still says that there should be an assessment of some of the damage that may well have been caused by those US strikes overnight on the nuclear facilities, saying that the concern was that this would be the beginning of greater violence in the region, reiterating that some armed groups had already vowed that they would attack American installations in the region if America were to get involved in strikes on Iran, which of course the United States now has. We then heard from Rafael Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, who announced that there will be a meeting of executives in Vienna tomorrow to discuss what has happened in Iran overnight. Mr. Grossi is saying that the IAEA now needs a cessation of hostilities to allow for inspectors to go to the sites in Iran that have been hit by the Americans overnight, saying that there were craters visible. We've seen that from our own, from satellite images that have been released online, showing Fordo that had been hit. There is no assessment yet, Mr. Grossi said, of underground damage to that site. Of course, Fordo is where uranium has been enriched to 60%, where it is said that there are underground enrichment facilities that the Iranians had kept secret, kept safe, but not safe from those massive ordnance penetrator bombs that the United States dropped on it last night. As you can see, the Russian representative at the United Nations Security Council is still addressing the assembly. Let's take a listen in to the Russian perspective on what's happened.
This is what Washington and Western Jerusalem are seeking. The Russian Federation, as a responsible state and a permanent member of the Security Council, cannot abide such a scenario. We cannot support it. Iran, as per the NPT, has the right to develop its civilian nuclear program. Overnight, the US has de facto nullified years of diplomatic efforts aimed at ensuring compliance with this fundamental principle. Agreeing with the legality of US actions is tantamount to throwing out all of the international community's advances on this front. And since we talked about the importance of the NPT and the global non-proliferation regime today, I'd like to remind you that Israel has not yet acceded to the NPT. Thus, there cannot be a comprehensive IAEA inspections program vis-a-vis Israel. As for Iran, in keeping, I'd like to remind you that Israel has not acceded to the NPT, so no comprehensive IAEA inspections program vis-a-vis Israel is being implemented. As for Iran, Iran was and remains the most monitored IAEA state in the world. And instead of supporting Iran, we're getting bombardments of this country, including its civilians. This is a country, and this is being done by a country which has in principle refused to sign the NPT. This is an outrageous, cynical situation. It's very strange that the IAEA DG did not say a word about this, nor did he call on Israel to join the NPT, not once. Madam President, I think that everyone in this room can see full well that unless we stop the escalation, the Middle East will find itself on the verge of a large-scale conflict with unpredictable consequences for the entire international security system. Plus, the entire world might end up on the verge of a nuclear disaster. We call for an immediate cessation of aggressive actions by Israel and the US, restraint on the part of all parties, and return into the fold of international diplomacy and the negotiations process. Yet, calls on the part of UN Security Council members are not enough. Based on the provisions of the UN Charter, and these are the very same provisions that those who are hypocritically staying silent today call for respect for in other cases. On the basis of these provisions, the Security Council is simply duty-bound to craft a collective decision which would make unacceptable strikes on Iranian nuclear infrastructure, which are under IAEA safeguards. To this end, we need, first and foremost, a clear-cut legal and political assessment of what happened. For all those who are not pursuing any hidden agendas nor double standards, this is patently obvious. To this end, the Russian Federation, China and Pakistan have prepared and disseminated this morning a short and balanced UN Security Council draft resolution, including a call for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire and for a search for a diplomatic solution surrounding the Iranian nuclear program. The text reflects the positions of an overwhelming majority of Security Council members expressed at our meetings held on the 13th and 20th of June. We're counting on the support of all Security Council members to ensure that the Council can, as soon as possible, send a signal about the need to immediately immediately end the violence, something that the Secretary General again called for, inter alia. Unless the Security Council takes a clear-cut and principled position, further escalation is inevitable. We call on all Security Council members to adopt a responsible approach and to support the proposed draft. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation, and I give the floor now to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Yencha, and Director General Rafael Grossi for your continued attention on this urgent matter of international peace and security. Madam President, last evening, U.S. military strikes targeted nuclear facilities in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, with the aim of dismantling Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and stopping the nuclear threat posed by the world's foremost state sponsor of terror. This operation sought to eliminate a long-standing but rapidly escalating source of global insecurity and to aid our ally Israel in our inherent right of collective self-defense, consistent with the UN Charter. For 40 years, the Iranian government has called for death to America and death to Israel, and posed a constant menace to the peace and security of its neighbors, the United States, and the entire world. Iran has attacked Israel with hundreds of ballistic missiles and through terrorist proxies. For decades, Iran has been responsible for misery and countless deaths across the Middle East. Iran's government and its proxies have also killed numerous Americans, including American service members in Iraq and Afghanistan. In recent weeks, Iranian officials have intensified their hostile bluster and rhetoric. Iran has long obfuscated its nuclear weapons program and stonewalled good faith efforts in recent negotiations. Madam President, the time finally came for the United States, in the defense of its ally and in the defense of our own citizens and interest, to act decisively. The Iranian regime cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Because?
Let us be clear. Iran should not escalate.
No, I don't think anyone should.
As President Trump said, any Iranian attack, direct or indirect, against Americans or American bases will be met with devastating retaliation. To fulfill its core mission of maintaining international peace and security, this Council must call upon the Iranian regime to end its 47-year effort to eradicate the State of Israel, to terminate its drive for nuclear weapons, to stop targeting American citizens and interests, and to negotiate peace in good faith for the prosperity and security of the Iranian people and all other states in the region. Madam President, a member state here today cast aspersions about hypocrisy and raised the forthcoming meeting on UN Security Council Resolution 2231.
You're all fucking hypocrites.
In that regard, I would point out that the recent IAEA report on verification and monitoring of Iran's noncompliance with obligatory nuclear safeguards shows clearly that Iran has been continuing to accelerate its nuclear activities without any credible civilian justification. We look forward to discussing the implications of this report and its broader implications on Tuesday when the Secretariat briefs on the report on implementation of UNSCR 2231. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. Secretary General, thank you very much for your remarks. And thank you also to Director General Grossi and Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General Yencha for their briefings. Madam President, this body is mandated to work for maintenance of international peace and security. There are moments in this chamber and outside, pivotal moments that shape our collective future. We believe today's debate is one of them. Slovenia denounces the sharp military escalation. This escalation risks to further exacerbate an already extremely dangerous and unstable regional situation and is threatening international peace and security. Therefore, we join the Secretary General's call on the parties to the conflict to disengage from further escalation and retaliation. We call for an immediate ceasefire. Madam President, we further call on the parties to the conflict to respect the UN Charter and international law, including the international humanitarian law. As we have been proven time and time again, violence and military conflicts lead nowhere but to an ever greater suffering of the innocent people of the Middle East. We are deeply alarmed about the toll of the ongoing situation on civilians, the chaos and the fear it is sowing. Madam President, Slovenia remains concerned about the size and unclear nature of Iran's nuclear program. We reaffirm our firm rejection of nuclear proliferation. At this point, I wish to express our full support to the work of the International Atomic Energy Agency and to you, DG Grossi. At this critical moment, with so much at stake, we must insist on diplomacy. A tailored diplomatic solution is needed. We welcome attempts of maintaining a diplomatic path in the recent days, namely the meeting of the E3 and the EU with Iran, and call on everyone else to follow this path. We call on the parties to the conflict and those with influence on them to prioritize diplomacy and peace and to return to the negotiating table. This must include Iran's nuclear question, leading us to establishing a credible, comprehensive, and verifiable solution, as well as dealing with other regional crises, including Gaza. Madam President, let me repeat. This is not a time for further escalations. This is not a time for retaliatory measures. It is time for de-escalation and diplomacy. It is time for peace.
Like USA,
and we call on all leaders to show leadership for peace. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Let's see what Africa has to say.
Madam President, at the outset, Somalia wishes to thank the Presidency for convening the Council again in response to escalating and grave developments in the Middle East. We also extend our appreciation to the Secretary General for his introductory remarks and to DG Grossi and ASG Yanka for their thorough updates on this worrying and rapidly evolving threat to international peace and security in the Middle East. The recent attacks on nuclear facilities of Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan in Iran represent a perilous escalation that threatens to engulf the entire region in an uncontrollable cycle of violence, suffering, and destruction. Somalia condemns any acts of aggression that violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states. Such actions are in clear contravention of the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, in particular Article 2, Paragraph 4, which prohibits the threat or use of force against any state. We reaffirm the importance of respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Our delegation believes that all member states share responsibility to act in accordance with these principles and commitments. Madam President, at this critical moment, 4 urgent actions must guide our collective response. First, uphold international law and the UN Charter. We call for respect of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states and adhere to the principles of good neighborliness and to resolve disputes through peaceful means. Violations of these principles imperil countless lives and deepen regional crisis. Second, pursue de-escalation and comprehensive ceasefire. We urge all sides to work towards de-escalation and achieve immediate and unconditional ceasefire in order to restore calm and confidence-building measures. The Security Council must support every diplomatic initiative aimed at reducing tensions and preventing further conflict. Third, the return to negotiations on non-proliferation. Somalia reaffirms the urgent necessity of returning to negotiations regarding the Iranian nuclear program. Our delegation believes that the only viable path forward is a swift recommitment to talks on non-proliferation in line with relevant international resolutions. We further reiterate our call for the establishment of a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and for all regional states to join the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation and Nuclear Weapons. Lastly, protection of civilians and safeguarding nuclear facilities. We emphasize the paramount importance of protecting civilians and civilian infrastructure. Also, we urge all parties to exercise restraint and refrain from targeting nuclear facilities, particularly under IAEA safeguards, given the grave risks such actions pose to populations, regional stability, and the environment. Equally important is to guarantee freedom of navigation in international waterways and to refrain from actions that undermine maritime security. To conclude, Madam President, the challenges before us demand a collective, measured response rooted in dialogue, mutual respect, and a renewed commitment to multilateralism. Our delegation stands ready to engage constructively with the international community to advance peace, stability, and security for all states in the Middle East. We urge all parties to act with responsibility and wisdom, placing the well-being of the region's people above all other considerations. Our delegation echoes the SG call to give peace a chance, and reiterates its call to seize this moment to redouble efforts for de-escalation and a return to negotiations and a sustainable diplomatic process. I thank you.
We just want to bring viewers some breaking news now. We're hearing from Iranian state media that the Fordow enrichment nuclear site in Iran has been hit again. That's the latest line that we're having there. The IAEA chief just moments ago had said that they were unsure of potentially the damage that had been done to that site. And of course, that site is deeper than many of the other enrichment sites across Iran. But we're hearing from Iranian state media that the Fordow enrichment site in Iran has been hit once more. We're going to go to the Iranian IAEA.
Unlawful aggression.
Let's listen in.
The present situation has reaffirmed the troubling reality that the IAEA and broader non-proliferation regime established under the NPT is no longer considered functioning effectively by some in upholding its foundational objective and legal responsibilities. The recent unlawful act of aggression has delivered a fundamental and irreparable blow to the international non-proliferation regime, conclusively demonstrating that the existing NPT framework has been rendered ineffective in fulfilling its foundational objective. These unlawful attacks may have far-reaching and devastating environmental consequences, posing serious risk of radioactive, chemical and radiological contamination, not only for Iran, but for the entire region. Furthermore, the physical security and containment of the nuclear materials, including enriched uranium, have been severely compromised. In accordance with the UN Charter and NPT, Iran reaffirms its inherent right to self-defense and will strongly defend its great nation, its sovereignty, and its supreme national interests by all necessary means. The era of unchecked impunity has come to an end. As long as the source of the threat persists, the Islamic Republic of Iran will continue to undertake necessary, resolute, and proportionate measures to neutralize it at a time, place, and manner of its own choosing, in full exercise of its inherent right to self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Our measures are proportionate, targeted, precise, and designed to neutralize the source of continued aggression. I thank you very much. I should come back to the meeting because it continues.
Okay, let's go live to our security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clarke, who joins me now. Michael, what a morning it's been already. So the IAEA chief warning that very significant damage at Iran's Fordow site, but also reports from Iranian state TV that the site has in fact been hit again. Your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, Rafael Grossi, the IAEA chief, is very concerned, of course. I mean, they've got monitoring units inside these enrichment halls, generally speaking, and they can detect how much damage. So he said originally that there didn't seem to be any fundamental damage at Natanz deep down, for instance, but there would be some damage to the centrifuges, and obviously they're worried about damage at Fordow. And people worry about the escape of radiation, but that's not really a problem as such, because this is highly enriched uranium, this U-235, enriched, up to maybe 60% in some cases. But until fission or fusion takes place, until it's used in some sort of interaction, then although it's very toxic, it's not particularly dangerous, and certainly not dangerous in a wider area. It's dangerous within the plant and maybe around the plant. So we're not talking here about a Chernobyl or a major leakage like Fukushima or something like that. But it is dangerous, and it's certainly a problem for the Americans if they're going to try to assess how much damage they've really done to Fordow. Now, who may have attacked Fordow this morning? I don't know. I mean, it could be an attack by the Israelis, perhaps, on the more of the infrastructure, because it's a very big site, and they certainly want to take down not just the enrichment centrifuges deep underground, but all of the infrastructure that feeds it, the power supply. If you cut off the power to the centrifuges, then the whole process stops and it wrecks it, so it can't be started again. I mean, they need constant power, so it may be that. Or it's possible that the Americans might have launched another attack. I mean, they've got enough assets in place with cruise missiles. They were firing Tomahawk missiles, probably from the USS Georgia, on Saturday night, which is one of their Ohio-class submarines. They fired apparently about 30 or 40. Some said up to 70. Well, they've got 150 on board. So it could have been an American attack as well. I suspect it was probably a follow-up Israeli attack. Just the politics of it suggest that it's more likely to be the Israelis attacking the infrastructure. But undoubtedly, the IAEA is very worried about the effects of attacking nuclear sites, because this has never really been done before on this scale. The Israelis attacked the Asyric reactor in Iraq in 1981, and they attacked the Al-Kibair reactor in Syria in 2007. In both cases, there was minimal other danger because they were much smaller reactors, but this is a big one. And going for it in the way that the Americans and the Israelis are is really unknowable. Nobody quite knows what the ultimate effects will be. So it's going to be a big week. And as I keep reminding people, the NATO summit begins tomorrow, and this will overshadow the summit, may well wreck the whole thing. This is really, really bad news for the transatlantic relationship in general.
Michael, we know that Iran's foreign minister is in Russia today, and there's just a couple of lines from the Kremlin too, saying that it wasn't informed in detail by the US of these advanced US strikes. What does that say about perhaps Iran's allies, or is it out there as a lone wolf at the moment?
Well, it doesn't want to be a lone wolf, but it probably is. Arachi, yes, is in Moscow because the Russians had this strategic partnership with Iran that was concluded only months ago. And of course, it's full of warm words, but it doesn't really mean anything. I think we can be fairly clear. The Russians are not going to stick their necks out for the Iranians. Now, the Iranians are really in the firing line, although the Iranians might have hoped that they would, but they probably won't. And neither will China. So Iran's two biggest friends are Russia and China. And I think both of them are holding back. Interestingly, the Israelis reassured the Russians. They said, look, we won't attack the Bushehr reactor. That was the Russian-built research reactor that's been going for years, and there were Russian personnel around Bushehr. And according to the Russians, according to Putin's office, they had been reassured by the Israelis that they wouldn't go for Bushehr in order to safeguard Russian interests and maybe Russian lives. But somebody, the Israelis, have gone for Bushehr. And that seems to have undercut some of the tense relationship or the delicate relationship between Tel Aviv and Moscow. So although the Russians are caught by this, I mean, that, you know, their major ally in the Middle East, the power Iran, from whom they get drones and ballistic missiles, is now under real pressure. I think the Russians will go along with the UN line. We've got to talk about this. We've got to stop this attack. This attack is illegal. Exactly as the Iranian minister was saying there. I mean, he was talking about Article 51 of the UN Charter, the self-defense article. Iran will claim that it can now invoke that article. The Russians will get in behind that. But in terms of real help to the Iranians, I don't think there will be any.
Okay, just before we go, Michael, the Strait of Hormuz, what do you see happening there, just briefly?
Briefly, well, it's as Ed Conway was saying, it's a major choke point. So 20% of oil, 20% of the world's gas comes from the Strait of Hormuz. If you close the Strait of Hormuz, the major loser is China, because most of the tankers that come out of the Strait of Hormuz, they turn left. They used to turn right, going to Europe and America. But now they don't. They turn left because they're all going to Asia. And the biggest loser from a closure of the Strait of Hormuz would be China. And for that reason, the Iranians would be really rather reluctant to do it or to try it. And I mean, the other problem about the Strait of Hormuz is that there's an enormous amount of naval congestion around there. So the prospects of incidents are very high indeed if anybody plays games with trying to restrict shipping. But as Ed said, I think the last look I took at oil prices, that oil prices would go well over $100. At the moment, they're sort of 73, 75, going towards 80 maybe. They'll go well over $100 if it looks as if the Strait of Hormuz is going to be closed.
Okay, Michael, always fascinating to get your take. Thank you so much for your time. We'll speak to you again, hopefully, in the next hour. We're watching Sky News coming up after a...
Tonight, fears of a widening Middle East conflict materialize in the skies above Qatar. Explosions thump over the Gulf state where Iran has targeted the largest US military base in the Middle East. Iran says it took aim at the Al Udeid air base with what it's calling a devastating and powerful missile attack. Qatar says there are no casualties in these strikes, but that it reserves the right to respond. It follows Iran's warning that it has a free hand to attack US targets after American bombs pounded nuclear sites yesterday. Meanwhile, Israel says it's hit Tehran harder than ever, including a notorious prison and elsewhere the Fordow nuclear site that was bombed by the US. And Iran's latest barrage into Israel sends people scrambling for bomb shelters as the first British evacuation flight takes off. While reaching out to a friend, Iran is told by Russia that their partnership is unbreakable. Good evening and welcome to our special program. I'm Yalda Hakim and welcome to Jerusalem, in a region where tonight the threat of a wider Middle East war is escalating. Iran has launched missile attacks at a Gulf ally, Qatar, targeting a massive US military base there. People in Qatar's capital, Doha, watched and filmed in shock as missiles flew above and interceptors fired. Qatar's government says there are no casualties, but added that it's within its right to respond if needed. President Donald Trump has said that they were expecting the attack. Still, Iran has described it as a mighty and successful response to America's aggression after US forces bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites on Sunday. Well, Al Udeid is one of about 19 US bases across the Middle East, which together host around 40,000 personnel. The airbase outside of Qatar's capital, Doha, is America's largest in the region and hosts the forward headquarters of US Central Command. In western Iraq, there was an alert at the Al-Assad base where interceptors were fired. However, US officials now say it appears this was a false alarm. We'll live shortly to our correspondents in the region and Washington, but we begin with this report from our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn.
After 2 days keeping the world guessing, Iran launched its retaliation. Operation Glad Tidings of Victory, sending ballistic missiles on their way. High over Qatar, they were intercepted, one after another. Iran's target, America's huge air base there. A direct response aimed squarely at US assets. There was panic on the ground as shoppers ran for cover. But the Qataris and Americans saw this coming. Iranians are reported to have warned them in advance, retaliating but avoiding casualties, perhaps, and further escalation.
Suddenly, I see people rushing out the gym and I run out and then we see just missiles flying both ways. It was coming one way first and then they looked very close, but they weren't. And then suddenly there were, I think, the interceptors coming in from the other side. So everyone started rushing home. A little bit of panic on the streets, people quickly flashing, breaking signals, trying to get to their loved ones.
President Trump visited the Al Udeid air base in Qatar only last month. He will now decide how he responds, a potentially fateful decision. Because the situation in the region could not be more combustible. This was Tehran today. Massive clouds of dust and smoke as Israeli jets launched strike after strike across Iran's capital city. 100 bombs in 2 hours, and with them a clear sense of mission creep. Not just military targets, but the buildings and organizations that underpin the Ayatollah's control of their country, including Evin Prison, where political prisoners and foreign nationals have been held. Iran sent its foreign minister to Moscow to seek support, hoping for more than warm words from Russia's president.
The absolutely unprovoked aggression against Iran has no basis and no justification.
The Iranians can protest at the legality of Israel and America's actions all they want.
These aggressive actions by Israel and the US are completely illegitimate and violate international rules and international norms.
But site by site, Iran's capabilities are being destroyed. How comprehensively, though, is not clear. Most of all at Fordo, where they were buried most deeply. Iran is still hitting Israel without warning, as those two sworn enemies continue trading missiles. Can Iran find a way through this while avoiding escalation with America? Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, in the last few minutes, President Donald Trump has responded to Iran's attack on that airbase in Qatar. He has said, and let's just get it up on our screen, Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected, and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were knocked down, and one was set free because it was headed in a non non-threatening direction. I am pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it out of their system and there will hopefully be no further hate. He also goes on to say in a separate Truth Social post, I'd like to thank the highly respected Emir of Qatar for all that he has done in seeking peace for the region.
I just want to read out the bit they didn't read out for some reason. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Not sure why they didn't read that bit out.
A Truth Social post. I'd like to thank the highly respected Emir of Qatar for all that he has done in seeking peace for the region. Regarding the attack today at the American base in Qatar, I'm pleased to report, and he goes on to say, in addition to no Americans being killed or wounded, very importantly, there have also been no Qataris killed or wounded. Thank you for attention to this matter. And then he writes in capital letters, quintessential Donald Trump, congratulations world, it's time for peace. So a few crucial things coming out of those statements that he's made. He's thanked the highly respected Emir of Qatar, to quote Donald Trump, which indicates and confirms that this was a staged, coordinated attack. And as he has said here, that it has allowed Iran to get it out of their system. Hopefully there'll be no further hate. And clearly the Qataris have assisted in bringing the two sides, to the negotiating table through these strikes to settle the bill. Well, shortly we'll speak to our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, who's waiting for us in northwestern Iraq. But first, let's go to our James Matthews, who's at the White House. And James, I've just read those two posts he just posed. What will Israel do next? Joining me now is the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. It does appear that as far as the United States and Iran is concerned, they've drawn a line in the sand. They may have settled their bill based on what President Trump has been saying, based on what Ayatollah Khamenei has been saying. But the question is, what is Israel going to do next? Because this could still remain, this tit-for-tat attacks that we've been seeing between Israel and Iran over the course of the last week and a half.
Well, I think, Yalda, it depends on the situation on the ground. We have a lot of targets still in Iran, and we've proved our capabilities only this morning. But it depends also what Iran will decide to do. And you know what's interesting, you saw that they targeted the military base in Qatar. They proved that they can actually send accurate missiles. But when it comes to Israel, the missile lands in hospitals, in neighborhoods, in communities. So it shows that, when they say that they make mistakes, it's a lie. They have the ability to send accurate missiles, unfortunately. So, we will follow the situation.
Ambassador, as far as we know and the sources we've spoken to, this was a staged, coordinated, planned attack between the United States and Iran, whether directly or indirectly. The US president has confirmed that they were fully aware that this was coming. So in many ways, you say that these were very direct attacks on this base, but also this is very much a staged attack.
Well, I don't know that, Yelda, but, it was an attack from Iran on an Arab state, on a military base. But, I'm talking about the technical aspect of the attack, that, they have the ability to target very accurate targets. But when it comes to targeting Israel, like we see almost every day, they choose to target civilian targets and communities. So, Iran should decide where they're heading. They are aware of our capabilities. And we have demonstrated our ability to target almost everywhere in Iran, including remote sites. So it's basically now up to them to decide what they want to do. We have more targets, but I think we can all agree that the majority of the threat of a nuclear Iran is behind us, thanks to the work of the IDF and the US.
Ambassador, is it? Because when we look at the battle damage assessment, which the United States is still looking at, and Israeli media has been reporting it. I'm here in Israel speaking to Israeli officials on a daily basis, and they say that the United States officials have told them that there was heavy damage, but there are some analysts saying that it hasn't necessarily completely obliterated, as the US president has been saying, the Iranian program, and that also the Iranians have moved the materials, the centrifuges. We saw those satellite images of trucks moving the material to perhaps other sites, and that Iran may use this as leverage in the future. So these claims by Israel that perhaps it has, first of all, the questions around the intelligence of whether Iran was in fact close to acquiring a bomb or weaponizing it. But it's certainly tonight, when you look at the situation, the fact that Iran is now saying that they may even no longer, coordinate with the IAEA, has it not created more danger in this region because of Israel's actions by attacking Iran a week and a half ago?
Absolutely not. Exactly the contrary. When you look at where Iran is today compared to where they were 2 weeks ago, when we received the intelligence about their intention, to put together the enriched uranium, the triggering mechanism, the ballistic missiles, today it will take them decades to build similar capability if they choose to do so. I hope they will not do that, because we will follow very carefully what's happening in Iran, and not only us. The entire world will watch very carefully what's happening in Iran. And I think thanks to what we did, and thanks to the US, and we have to be grateful for the leadership of President Trump, because those efforts pushed Iran back. And I hope that the people of Iran will be able to focus on their own issues, build their economy, prosper, have better life, rather than spending hundreds of billions of dollars. Yelda, I don't know if you ever looked at the numbers, but Iran spent trillions of dollars on this nuclear project, and I think today they should recalculate where they're heading.
Ambassador, you were talking there earlier about how Iran deliberately targets civilians. Many Iranians are angry about the high civilian death toll in Iran as a result of Israel's strikes. We understand over 700 Iranian civilians have been killed in these strikes over the course of the last week or so. Israel has also spoken about regime change, but ultimately when the Iranian public is currently, there is no love lost, by the way. The bulk of the Iranian people are, no love lost between the regime and the Iranian people. And we've seen over the course of over a decade, going back to 2009, when people have been protesting against this regime. But ultimately, with Israel's actions, it certainly doesn't put Israel in a favorable position when so many civilians in Iran have been killed as a result of these strikes.
So first, let me be very clear about it. We have nothing against the Iranian people. On the contrary, we respect them, we pray for them, and we targeted military sites. And if there were any civilian casualties, we regret that. We have the precise ammunition, and we targeted nuclear sites and military sites. Regarding the regime, it's not up to us to decide whether there will be a regime change or not. I hope it will happen for the people of Iran. They are the one who suffered for 46 years, and they are the one who paid the price since the revolution. So I hope that for their future, there will be a better regime that will invest in the people of Iran, and not on the proxies that will send money to schools and hospitals, and not to the Houthis, to the Hezbollah, to Hamas. It's about time that the Iranian people will receive what they deserve, which is a better leadership.
Definitely. We all do.
That's what you say, Ambassador, but throughout the course of the last week or so, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has talked about regime change. There's been talk about assassinating the supreme leader. The defense minister of Israel has said that the supreme leader can no longer remain. We've heard very similar sentiment from other ministers here in Israel. So you are taking a more balanced approach here. But across the board, we've seen Israeli leaders talk time and time again about regime change in Iran.
So I will make it very clear, I think many Israelis and many people in the US and across the world would like to see a regime change. and believe that's the right thing for Iran. The question if that is part of the goal of the operation, no, it's not part of the goals. Our goals were very clear. We wanted to reduce the threat, to make sure that we push back the nuclear program and the threat of the ballistic missiles. Those were the goals, and we achieved most of them. Regarding the regime change, we will be very happy. It's a wishful thought for, I think, every Western leader that you will ask will tell you that they would love to see a different regime, but the people of Iran will decide about it. It's up to them to choose which leadership they will have.
Ambassador Danon, thank you very much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you very much, Yalda.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock, our top story. Donald Trump says that the ceasefire between Israel and Iran is now in effect, but only after an intense night of violence.
Plus, Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky speaks exclusively to Sky News and warns that British companies are still helping to arm Russia.
It's Tuesday, the 24th of June. Your headlines. Donald Trump hails the end of what he calls the 12-day war between Israel and Iran.
As he heads to the NATO summit in the Netherlands, the US president is claiming his biggest foreign policy win.
At least 4 Israelis killed after Iran launches 6 waves of ballistic missiles in the early hours of this morning.
Also ahead, Ukraine's president tells Sky News that weapons components from the UK are finding their way into Russia despite sanctions.
Of course, UK companies never delivered a weapon to Russia. Of course not. But there are some components from some companies.
And nearly 100 Labour MPs join a rebellion against the government's plan to cut disability benefits. A very good morning to you. The US President Donald Trump says Israel and Iran have agreed to a complete and total ceasefire, which is now in effect. State television in Iran has announced that the ceasefire has begun after 6 waves of missiles were launched at Israel in the early hours of this morning. There's been no official comment yet from Israel, where at least 9 people were killed overnight. And this is the scene at one of the locations where the missiles hit. Well, we've got all angles of this covered for you this morning. Tom Cheshire's live in Jerusalem. David Blevins is live in Washington for us. We'll be joined by Deborah Haynes shortly from The Hague, where leaders are gathering for the NATO summit. Tom, first of all, bring us up to speed, particularly with that situation overnight on the ground in Israel.
I mean, it's been so fast moving over the last 12 hours. Around 12 hours ago, there were Iranian missiles flying at a US military base in Qatar. And things have moved incredibly quickly since then, often confusingly. There was this announcement of a ceasefire by Donald Trump on social media, but the timings were interesting. It was quite hard to work out exactly what was going on. People went to bed thinking a ceasefire was going to take effect at some time today, but they were woken up by alerts on their phone. They rushed to shelters after there were 6 waves of ballistic missiles flying over Israel, flying into Israel from Iran. Now, one of those missiles at least did get through Israel's defenses. It struck a residential building in Beersheba, the biggest city in the south of Israel. Its hospital was struck a few days earlier and has resulted in multiple casualties, the first casualties for a few days. Now, rescue workers are there. They've told Sky News that the operation is complex and ongoing, so that toll could rise. And obviously bringing into questions about what does that mean for a ceasefire, especially since that 6th wave landed here after 7 a.m. local time when that ceasefire was supposed to come into effect. Now, Iran, state media has said the ceasefire is in effect, and it appears it launched those missiles before that deadline. And that is something we have seen in conflicts around here, that even after a ceasefire is announced, the sides keep firing until that ceasefire takes effect. We saw it in Lebanon last year, where Israel kept hitting Beirut right up until its ceasefire with Hezbollah then stopped, although it has been hitting it since. As far as we can tell, as you said, there's been no official confirmation from the Israeli government, but it does appear to be holding. The IDF said they had hit sites in Tehran, in western Iran, they'd hit missile launchers which were primed to take part in that salvo that struck Israel today. Iranian state media, according to Reuters news agency, are saying that actually a residential building in Iran has also been hit in the early hours of the morning, resulting in deaths there too as well. But here on the ground, it feels a bit calmer. We've had that statement from Donald Trump that the ceasefire is now in effect. What we don't know are the conditions of all that, whether there is a text, what that means for Iran in particular, and we're still awaiting official confirmation from Israel. Things have been moving so quickly over the last few hours, but it seems to be in a place where the ceasefire is in effect and potentially this war is at an end.
Tom, stick with us. I want to get to David next in Washington. David, give us the US side of things, which is pretty much as dramatic a 12 to 24-hour period of time as it has been for Tom there in Jerusalem. Most notably, in the last hour, Donald Trump's tweet confirming that despite question marks, the ceasefire is in place.
Yes, well, if the ceasefire is in effect, as Donald Trump is claiming, it is nothing short of a diplomatic triumph. Unthinkable, really, and we're learning more detail every hour about how it came about. Now, on one level, he can claim this without any real risk, because if it holds, then he can take the credit for it. And if it doesn't hold, well, he'll simply blame whichever side is not maintaining the ceasefire. But you'll remember last weekend when the Americans pulled off that military coup to some extent by bombing Iran, they staged a decoy, sending B-2 bombers west to Guam, while others flew covertly east to carry out the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Well, to some extent, they've done the same thing politically over the last 24 hours, because while we were all preoccupied by what was going on in Doha, those Iranian airstrikes yesterday, it seems the president was engaged in high-stakes diplomacy, hitting the phones, as Vice President J.D. Vance put it in a television interview last night. President Trump was persuading Benjamin Netanyahu to sign up to a ceasefire, and then asking his friends in Qatar to ask the Iranians to do likewise, and they did. He brought them to the table as well. Even though we had this complicated timeline involved, it does appear that the ceasefire is now in effect. And if it is, then that, to a large extent, silences Donald Trump's critics. He didn't achieve a ceasefire in Ukraine. He didn't achieve one in Gaza. But this would be the most significant act of peacemaking in the Middle East for generations. And that will be something Donald Trump will be very keen to trumpet as he heads to NATO summit over the next few days.
Well, we're going to talk about that NATO summit in just a moment. Deborah is able to join us now from there. But one final question to Tom, first of all. Tom, as you said already, we haven't had official word yet from Prime Minister Netanyahu about this ceasefire and whether they're willing to observe it. But one would assume, or is this naive, that he has no choice but to observe it, at least in the short term, even despite that heavy toll of 9 people killed overnight by Iranian missiles?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that is going to be a calculation, those fatalities and casualties in the south of Israel. On the other hand, we had been hearing briefings, really, that Israel was prepared to wind down its war with Iran by this weekend. So that was already in motion. We do know that the Prime Minister, he had a cabinet meeting at 2 a.m. last night where he briefed his ministers on what had happened, but they also asked them to maintain media silence. That silence is still holding. But I think, Netanyahu has surprised people all the way through this, especially with Israel launching its own attack without US support. The US obviously coming in such dramatic fashion with that B-2 bombing raid and those Tomahawk missiles fired. But, he's really set the terms and the pace of this. And in terms of getting what he wanted was a US strike, and people doubted whether that would happen. That has happened. It's hard to see what more he could get. I think a lot of it does depend on the conditions of that ceasefire, especially when it comes to Iran's nuclear weapons program and what's entailed in there, because the whole point of this war, as it was framed here in Israel, was to stop Iran getting a bomb. Now, if they think that has been done, if they think the ceasefire is going to continue to get that job done, that will be good for Israel, be good for Netanyahu. This war has been popular. He's not always the most popular politician, but he's really achieved many of his strategic goals in a way that I think would be astounding to anyone even a month ago, let alone 5 years ago. So if this ceasefire is holding, I think it's a bit and wait and see. I don't think he's going to go against Donald Trump in the meantime. But again, things can always change very quickly here.
We're going to have more reaction to that exclusive interview that Mark Austin did with President Zelensky in a moment. But some breaking news in the last couple of moments to bring you, first of all. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel has agreed to Trump's ceasefire deal. That's crossing in the last couple of moments. They also are saying that Israel will respond forcefully to any violations of the ceasefire. That's coming from the Prime Minister's office. And the Prime Minister Netanyahu will deliver a statement later today. Of course, as we've been briefing overnight, there was question marks about the ceasefire that President Trump announced on social media hours ago because of Iranian strikes on Israel, which reports have suggested killed 9 Israelis. Despite that, President Trump confirmed the ceasefire was in place on social media an hour or so ago. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has said they were observing it. We were waiting official confirmation on the Israeli side. We now have that. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office saying Israel has agreed to the US ceasefire deal. Let's get a reaction immediately from Deborah Haynes, our defense and security editor, of course, is in The Hague this morning ahead of the NATO summit. If this now holds, we've got all of the parts in place, Deborah, in the short term. If this now holds, it's a remarkable achievement in what has been a roller coaster night, set of days, last 10 days.
It really is, and a remarkable boost towards Donald Trump's hopes, maybe, of getting a Nobel Peace Prize. He's made no secret of that, has he? And it also really underlines the relationships, like it or not, in terms of people who have criticised Donald Trump and his foreign policy, but the relationships that he has cultivated, of course, with Benjamin Netanyahu, the two of them very, very close, but also with other regional powers, including in Saudi Arabia. All of those different machinations of relationships really count when it comes to trying to strike a deal. And if he has achieved what some would believe to be the impossible, a ceasefire of this eruption of war between the sworn enemies, Israel and Iran, then that is a huge moment, not just for his presidency, but for the whole of the Middle East. A key question, though, will be what next? Donald Trump said that he took that military action, joining in Israel's war over the weekend, striking 3 nuclear targets in Iran in order to stop the Iranians from getting a nuclear bomb, something Tehran has always denied its nuclear program was about. However, if there is any indication that that has not succeeded, that attempts to enrich uranium to military-grade level is still continuing, then that military action will have failed. And so then what will Donald Trump do next? At the moment, though, he is clearly going to take the win.
Deborah, just got some further wires coming across. Netanyahu saying that Israel's achieved its goal of removing Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile threat, and also that Netanyahu is saying Israel thanks President Trump for support and defense and participation in removing the Iranian nuclear threat. We could talk all day long about what this means for President Trump in the short and the medium term, as you've already said. What does it mean for Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has been embattled at times on the global stage, at times domestically as well? This last 10, 15 days has been quite extraordinary for him as well.
It has, and it has really diverted attention from the enormous and mounting concern about the awful humanitarian situation in Gaza in the wake of Israel's war against Hamas there. That is not resolved, and clearly attention will return to that. And in terms of what the Israeli Prime Minister is saying about removing the nuclear threat, it's hard to understand how he can possibly know that for sure right now, especially given the head of the UN's Atomic Energy Agency only yesterday said that it's going to take some time before anyone will be able to assess for sure the impact of the US strikes, in particular against the Fordow facility, which is buried deep underground.
Tom Cheshire is able to join us now live from Jerusalem. Tom, all morning we've been wondering, maybe not so much if, but when we get that official confirmation from the Israeli side that they are adhering, in the short term at least, to this ceasefire deal. We have that now. Expand on it for us, because there's warm words in these statements as well from Prime Minister Netanyahu towards the US and President Trump.
Obviously.
Yeah, and especially in terms of what they have been doing. We talked earlier about this, whether this could be mission accomplished for them. And the Prime Minister's office is saying that in light of the operation's objectives being achieved and in full coordination with President Trump, Israel has agreed to the President's proposal for a bilateral ceasefire. So saying it was Donald Trump's proposal there, but also saying that Israel will respond forcefully to any violation of the ceasefire. Now, that is important because, again, recent history here, Israel's ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon, that has still seen Israeli strikes. There are still Israeli drones regularly flying over Beirut. And they're able to do that because they have more or less destroyed Hezbollah, and it's not a sovereign nation to the same extent. You know, it's a militia group rather than Iran, which is also a long way away. So when it comes to any violations, if they do happen, and how Israel might respond, there is the element of danger there that, you know, it takes one infraction. The other side of that is that these are two nations, these are two governments. They're a long way away, so it would have to probably be quite a deliberate provocation. But what Israel has been doing in Lebanon, say, where it's pretty regularly conducting strikes in the south of the country against what it says is terrorist infrastructure. I'm not sure that sort of thing they'd be able to do that in Iran without Iran responding forcefully. And I think the other aspect of this, as Deborah mentioned there, is that attention now, and it has been obscured for a while, but all the while this war between Israel and Iran, which has been so dramatic, the war that Israel is fighting in Gaza against Hamas and the huge number of civilian casualties that have accompanied that is still ongoing. So I think that will become a source of attention. The leader of the opposition saying that's where attention now must turn. Those hostages, again, that has been such a source of contention, and that has been a cause of deep unpopularity for the Prime Minister here. Attention will now return to them and getting them back.
Tom, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Let's bring in...
Good morning. We begin with breaking news as the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran appears to be on the brink of collapse. Israel claims Iran has fired missiles into its airspace just a couple of hours after the two countries had supposedly agreed to a truce put forward by US President Donald Trump. Well, Israel's defense minister says he's ordered the country's military to respond forcefully to Iran. Well, let's go live to Sky's Cordelia Lynch, who's in the southern Israeli city of Beersheba, where an apartment block was hit by an Iranian missile. Cordy, just bring us up to speed. What's the extent of the damage, and what are people there saying to you?
Good morning to you. Well, the damage is extensive. You can see behind me, this is a 7-story building, totally destroyed. They've been clearing the rubble over the past few hours. It struck at around 6 o'clock this morning. 3 people in the same apartment, as we understand, were killed. Another person towards the entrance of the building. You can see some of these cars as well, completely covered in dust and debris. We have seen here just how fragile, how perilous this moment is. Now, we have heard from Israel. They are accusing Iran of a serious violation of the ceasefire. Now, this strike occurred before that ceasefire was brought into place at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, the Israelis are accusing the Iranians of them firing a missile after the ceasefire and into northern Israel, about 2 hours from here. Now, there's some suggestion that they are trying to conflate what occurred here with that strike in the north. Iran deny any violation of the ceasefire. We've heard from state media there that there was no missile fired into Israel. So clearly, conflict rhetorically and uncertainty if there might be more physical conflict to come as well. Donald Trump yesterday spoke with great optimism, very declaratively about hopes for this truce, for peace, but it is very uncertain. We don't know what the hours ahead look like, and we see two sides that have spent the last 12 days in fierce opposition to another, still speaking of their right and their determination to respond forcefully if they have to. And Israel, in the past couple of hours, making clear they do intend to respond forcefully. We are also expecting to hear from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. I think it is striking that very few other ministers are speaking. There is a kind of political silence there that has set in. Clearly, Netanyahu wants to control this message, but exactly what that message might be in the next few hours is very unclear.
Okay, Cordelia, thank you so much for that update there in southern Israel.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that? I didn't like plenty of things I saw yesterday. I didn't like the fact that Israel unloaded right after we made the deal. They didn't have to unload. And I didn't like the fact that the retaliation was very strong. But in all fairness, Israel unloaded a lot. And now I hear Israel just went out because they felt it was violated by one rocket that didn't land anywhere. That's not what we want, I'll tell you. And I'm telling you, I'm not happy about that, Israel, either. I got to get Israel to calm down now.
The sides accuse each other for violating the ceasefire. So
I think they both violated it. I don't think I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. So as soon as I get away from you, I'm going to see if I can stop it, okay? Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there? Absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. The B-2 pilots did their job. They did it better than anybody could even imagine. They hit late in the evening. It was dark with no moon, and they hit that target with every one of those things, and that place is gone. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. You take a look at the pinpricks, and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks and these cable networks are real losers. You really are. You're real losers. You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch that garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news. But I think CNN is a gutless group of people. And the people that run it, nobody even knows it's been sold so many times. But the people that run it ought to be ashamed. MSDNC, a guy named Brian Roberts, he heads it. He's a disgrace. He's a weak, pathetic disgrace. Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?